Shalom. Thanks for joining me. I'm going to read Deuteronomy chapter 12. This is where we're picking up again. Reminder, all of Deuteronomy is taking place on the eastern shore of the Jordan River in what is called the plains of Moab. This is Moses now at the very end of his life, and he's simply reciting their entire history, and he is recalling and reiterating all of the laws of God. And so here in chapter 12, it continues. Here are the laws and rulings you are to observe and obey in the land of Adonai, the God of your ancestors, has given you to possess as long as you live on earth. Pay attention to this right here. You must destroy all the places where the nations you are dispossessing served their gods, whether on high mountains, on hills, or under some leafy tree. Break down their altars, smash their standing stones to pieces, burn up their sacred poles completely, and cut down the carved images of their gods. Exterminate their name from that place. Very important that you pay attention to this. In fact, it's useful not only to tell the Israelites when you get into that land, you need to destroy all elements of false and pagan worship and worship of any other gods. In fact, if you do the best you can to exterminate the name for that place. But it's true in our lives as followers of Jesus of Nazareth today. There's to be no room in our heart for other gods. Other gods, my career, my image, my money, my possessions, my home, my car, my stuff, my toys. Name it. Money in my pocket. That can be an idol. The career I've chosen, the work I do, that could be an idol. My vocation, my prestige, my honor, that could be an idol. Anything can be an idol if it takes the place of God. Exterminate that from your heart. Love God with all your heart. And so here he goes, verse 4. But you are not to treat Adonai your God this way. Rather, you are to come to the place where Adonai your God will put his name. He will choose it from all your tribes, and you will seek out that place, which is where he will live, and go there. Now, let me pause a minute and say this. Up to this time, there was the tabernacle that was built, and people were going to the tabernacle to bring certain offerings, but there was also, at the same time, Israelites would do what everybody else in their generations had been doing, and what everyone around them and the culture around them was doing, is when they would go up to a hillside, which is a high place. And that would be symbolically meaning I'm going up to meet with God, whoever that God was if I was a pagan, or whoever God is if I'm an Israelite. And there I'm going to also make offerings and prayers and so forth. So there was this whole acts of worship on high places. And all throughout the Old Testament, you keep hearing over and over again, the Israelites didn't get rid of the high places. The Israelites worshipped at the high places. And here God is saying, and this is the big cultural transition he is making, from now on, you don't go anywhere you want to worship God. If it looks like a good place to go, get up there on a high hill or something like that, don't do that. You go to the tabernacle. And wherever the tabernacle is, that's where you go. That is the only place you go. So the tabernacle wasn't going to have a permanent home. The tabernacle was going to be moved around between the 12 tribes of Israel. So wherever the tabernacle happened to be, that's where you were supposed to go and worship. And that was supposed to be the only authorized place to worship. You didn't go up on the high places anymore. You didn't walk up on a hillside and do whatever you wanted to do up there. What God is attempting to do here is to change their culture and get them out of old habits. And everybody around them, all the countries around them, all the peoples around them continued to worship on high places. But what was Yahweh telling them? You don't do that. You don't worship me the way they do. I have a tabernacle. That tabernacle is going to be in a very specific place, and I am going to be where that tabernacle is. You want to meet me? You come to the tabernacle. That's where you do it. That's the only place you worship me from now on. So this is a major cultural change for the Israelites, and this is not an easy transition. And by the way, it's one that they never accomplished until they were taken captives and lost their land. And when they returned from captivity, occasionally some of them still found a high place and worshiped on a hill. But the majority of them did not anymore because they rebuilt the temple, and now they worshiped only at the temple. So this is important to understand this. So verse 6, you will bring there your burnt offerings, your sacrifices, your tenths, that's T-I-N-T-H-S, that's tithes, that you set aside for Adonai, the offerings that you give, the offerings you have vowed, your voluntary offerings, and the firstborn of your cattle and sheep. There you will eat in the presence of Adonai your God, and you will rejoice over everything you set out to do, you and your households, in which Adonai your God has blessed you. Take joy in what you have accomplished. Be happy for what has happened, what God has blessed you with. That's what he's saying. He said, you will not do things the way we do them here today. Pay attention to this. Now, this is verse 8. You will not do things the way we do them here today, where everyone does whatever in his own opinion seems right, because you haven't yet arrived at the rest, R-E-S-T, that means the Sabbath, the rest, an inheritance which Adonai your God is giving you. Symbolically, the idea of crossing the Jordan and taking the promised land meant that I could now be at peace. I could be at rest because I didn't have to fight any more wars. And that symbolic rest became an image of salvation in Jesus Christ. I don't have to work for my salvation anymore. Jesus earned it for me. I come to him, and I believe what he has done for me is true, and I believe that he now owns me. I give myself to him. He now is my Lord, my Savior, and I am at rest in him. So that's what that is all symbolically about. But it says, verse 9, because you haven't yet arrived at the rest and inheritance which Adonai your God is giving you. But when you cross the Jordan and live in the land Adonai your God is having you inherit, and he gives you rest from all your surrounding enemies, so that you are living in safety, then you will bring all that I am ordering you to the place Adonai your God chooses to have his name live. That's the tabernacle, wherever the tabernacle is going to be. Your burnt offerings, sacrifices, tenths, and the offering from your hand, and all your best possessions that you dedicate to Adonai. And you will rejoice in the presence of Adonai your God. You, your sons, your daughters, your male and female slaves, and the Levi staying with you, inasmuch as he has no share or inheritance with you. Be careful not to offer your burnt offerings just anywhere you see, but do it in the place Adonai will choose in one of your tribal territories. There is where you are to offer your burnt offerings and do everything I order you to do. However, you may slaughter and eat meat wherever you live and wherever you want, in keeping with the degree to which Adonai your God has blessed you. The unclean and the clean may eat it, if it were gazelle or deer, but don't eat the blood. Pour it out on the ground like water. Now, this originated there in the book of Leviticus. You do not eat blood because the life is in the blood, so you don't do that. Now, by the way, again, notice you don't just go anywhere that you think is the right place to be. You go to the tabernacle. There's only one place now from now on. And by the way, it's one of the reasons why I go to church. How about that? Could you worship God sitting on the edge of the shore down in Galveston? Yeah, you could do that. Could you worship God out on the golf course if you're playing golf? Yeah, you can do that. Could you worship God while you're camping out at Stephen F. Austin State Park, just a little ways away? Yeah, you could do that. Could you worship God sitting in your back patio like I am right now, surrounded by all this beautiful background that I have? Yeah, I sure can. But what is the one place where I go? Where do I bring my gifts, my offerings, my tithes? Where do I have a place to do that? Church. Yeah. That's why I go here. Crossbridge Christian Church. That's why I do that. It's the authorized place. I can worship God anywhere all the time, and I do. But when I want to get together with my brothers and sisters, when I want to have a place where I can hear the Word of God, have the music, and bring my offerings, there's one authorized place. That's why I go there. This is verse 17. You are not to eat on your own property the tenth of your grain, new wine, or olive oil that you set aside for Adonai, or the firstborn of your cattle or sheep, or any offering you have vowed, or your voluntary offering, or the offering from your hand. No, you are to eat these in the presence of Adonai your God, in the place Adonai your God will choose. You and your sons, daughters, male and female slaves, and the Levi who is your guest. You ought to rejoice before Adonai your God in everything you undertake to do. As long as you are living on your property, take care not to abandon the Levi. Those are the priestly tribe, because they didn't have their own land. They had cities that they could live in, but they didn't have land like all the other tribes did. So you were always told to be mindful of them. Now, by the way, that's one of the reasons why we have a tradition within Christianity of taking care of our church pastors. And that's exactly why we do that. And by the way, let me also say this too. What if you don't have a church building? You just have a gathering in a home. Is it a home church? Is that our church? Yes. In fact, for the first 400 years of Christianity, we all met in people's homes. Or maybe, like in one case, the Apostle Paul rented a hall that he taught from. And it happened to be next door to a Jewish synagogue, by the way, in the city of Corinth. He was there for 18 months. He rented this hall himself, by the way. That's important to note that. Also, wherever they could gather, like outside on a bank of a river, like in Philippi, they met outside in a riverbank. They couldn't find a synagogue, which meant they had such a small Jewish population, they didn't even have enough to form what's called a minyan, which means you have 10 heads of families. They didn't even have 10 families. So they couldn't form a minyan. You have to have a minyan in order to form a synagogue. Couldn't do it. They didn't have enough. So in Philippi, Paul just went out where he figured there might be a place of prayer, and sure enough, he found it. And so church doesn't necessarily mean an actual building, but it means the gathering of God's people wherever they are. And so what if we just have a home church, just like we did in the book of Acts? Yeah, that counts. You're darn right that counts. That's the place. Anyway, verse 20, when Adonai your God expands your territory as he promised you, and you say, I want to eat meat, simply because you want to eat meat, then you may eat meat as much as you want. If the place which Adonai your God chooses to place his name is too far away from you, then you are to slaughter animals from your cattle or sheep, which Adonai has given you, and eat on your own property as much as you want. Eat it as you would gazelle or deer. The unclean and the clean alike may eat it. Just take care not to eat the blood, for the blood is the life, and you are not to eat the life with the meat. Don't eat it, but pour it out on the ground like water. Do not eat it so that things will go well with you and with your children after you, as you do what Adonai sees as right. Only the things set aside for God which you have, and the vows you have vowed to make, you must take, and go to the place which Adonai will choose. There you will offer your burnt offerings and the meat and the blood on the altar of Adonai your God. The blood of your sacrifices is to be poured out on the altar of Adonai your God, and you will eat the meat. Obey and pay attention to everything I'm ordering you to do, so that things will go well with you and with your descendants after you forever, as you do what Adonai sees as good and right. When Adonai your God has cut off ahead of you the nations you are entering in order to dispossess, and when you have dispossessed them and are living in their land, be careful, after they have been destroyed ahead of you, not to be trapped into following them, so that you inquire after their gods and ask, how did these nations serve their gods? I want to do the same. You must not do this to Adonai your God, for they have done to their gods all the abominations that Adonai hates. They even burn up their sons and daughters in the fire for their gods. And by the way, there's plenty of archaeological evidence that the worship of two gods in particular, Molech and Chemosh, were infant and toddler and child sacrifices. And it's horrible to even describe it. I'm not going to hear it might even traumatize you, but that is exactly what they did. They took living children and threw them into a fire and burned them up alive. and they consider that worship of their gods. And you hear Adonai saying, man, don't worship those gods. Don't do that. Worshiping me is not like that. It's important to understand that. Well, chapter 13 next.